What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'll be talking about the U.S. Under-17 team that was named for the upcoming CONCACAF U17 tournament, which will also serve as qualifiers for the U17 World Cup. And this is a team that recently got leaked. Hopefully, it's the full one. If not, I'll end up deleting this video. But I think this is a very good squad. We've seen this U17 team a bit before. They did very well in a tournament in Europe, putting in a very good performance, winning 2 out of 3 games. Recently held their own against a 2005 group playing up as a group of 2006 players. And I think this is a very strong team. I'm excited to talk about them. I'm going to be running through the team. The roster is actually 23 players, so it likely includes 3 reserves. There's only going to be 20 players in the final tournament. So I'm not going to be going over everybody because I'd likely be talking about players who aren't going to even play. But I am going to be running through what are, in my opinion, the top prospects. And I'm just going to say, this is going to be all positive in regards to these players because they're under 17 guys. When I'm not talking about pro players, it's just unproductive to point out flaws in them. So like I said, this is going to be all positive. So keep in mind, don't get too blown away with the expectations for these guys. Every single player I'll be talking about has flaws. I'm just going to be talking about the positive aspects of these players because I think that's what we should be talking about. First, I'm going to talk about our boys from Barcelona, and I mean real Barcelona in Spain, not the one in Arizona, which is one of our better academies in the entire country, by the way, but in La Masia, the place where Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, Busquets, everybody like that came from. And first, Adrian Gill, a center midfielder out of Barcelona, and this guy, you can tell he's from La Masia. I feel like people kind of forget, because we're in a bit of a gap. We have Pedri and Gavi coming through right now, but man, the players that would come through that academy is just insane. Like Barcelona had Samuel Eto'o and Thierry Henry in their squad. They brought in Pedro, and he's obviously not the player that they were, but Pedro was an upgrade for that team over a Thierry Henry. He wasn't in his prime, but he really helped that team play better because just the intelligence that comes through when you play in that system, the technical ability, you can tell Gil has all of that. Really great player with intelligence, and on top of that, I think he's just a really solid guy outside of that. His dribbling is really solid. He can break the lines with his dribbling. He's got a good pass on him. He makes some really good assists. I think he'll be more of a box to box midfielder. He plays a bit of right back for Barcelona. I think he'll be playing in midfield for us, but he could possibly be playing right back. And he does have the defensive ability needed. He can get stuck in with tackles, and I think he has the athleticism to really compete defensively. He's just a really solid all around box box midfielder, and I'm excited about him. Then we have Diego Cochin, also out of Barcelona, and just the goalkeeper for this group. Really solid player, just all around everything you need. He already has the size you need, and he's probably going to keep growing. Athletic goalkeeper, can make a ton of stops, and just from film I've seen on him, very good with the ball at his feet. Can make good passes, good under pressure. Just a really solid keeper and a player who could really help us in the future. And in Barcelona, he's actually already training with Barcelona B, which I mean, obviously, if it gets to a situation, they bring in somebody new, but he's probably the fourth choice keeper for the entire Barcelona setup right now, and that's kind of crazy. And if he starts playing with Barcelona B, that's a very high level, and this is someone to keep a track on. Probably in terms of youth goalkeepers, only behind Slonina and Chris Brady right now. He's somebody I'm really high on, and you could expect to be a very good player for us in the near future. Then there's Cruz Medina from San Jose. And with Medina, he's a bit more of a center mid player. If I'm playing with this team, I'd probably put him out wide on the wing, but that's not because oh, we have other center mids I'd rather play ahead of him. If we're sticking with Barcelona analogies, it's Iniesta moving out wide because he's versatile enough to do so. And not that I'm comparing him to Iniesta, but just another really solid player, really good dribbler, can take on players very well. He's got a good burst of speed. I'm not sure about his top end, but he can get by players. And like another really technical guy. And I think why I'd put him on the wing is because he's very good in the final third, especially at this level. A lot of players like the end product just isn't developed. Of course it isn't. but I think he's very good at making that final pass, at putting in a shot, and I think that Cruz Medina could be a really solid player for this group, and he's definitely one of the most promising players in this under-17 setup. Next is Pedro Soma out of UA Cornellà in Spain. This is actually the club that Adrian Gill was at before he moved to Barcelona. And Soma is a really technical player. He can really keep the ball in possession well and make some good passes from a deep position. I think if Gill is playing as our center midfielder alongside Soma, Gill will be like venturing forward a little bit more, dribbling at players. Soma, he can be sitting deep and picking out some passes. I think he's really good at that and good in possession as well. On top of that, he's got a lot of athleticism that translates well to being a good defender. He can get stuck in, win aerial duels. Like he's pretty good all around. I think with like as he develops, he might turn into a bit more of a six. He has played there for this team in the past. I think right now he's better as an eight, and we want to get him on the ball as much as possible, a bit further forward. But Soma is a really solid player who, like, is another player to really get excited about with this squad. We have a lot of talented midfielders in this group, as you can tell. Up top is Carol Figueroa. He's a striker from Liverpool, and he looks like a promising player. He's the son of Minor Figueroa, who played against the U.S. as recently as the Nations League final. And like he looks like a talented player. It's a bit harder to gauge this guy because the footage isn't that great on him. Like you can't find too much footage on how he is as a player, but from what I've seen, he looks really talented. Like great finisher, and he does some crazy stuff in the box. Like I've seen him score like a good amount of bicycle kicks, which is kind of insane. On top of that, looks like a good athlete. As I mentioned, he can control his body enough to consistently score goals like that. And Liverpool's website describes him as having great pace, and just appears to be a player who looks really good. From what I've seen, his dribbling looks strong, and I'm really excited to get a better look at him this tournament because like playing with like the Liverpool U16s. He just moved up to the U18s. Like there's not too much film on him, so it'll be good to really get to see him more. I should say that he might be dealing with a bit of an injury right now, and if he's unavailable, it should be Zeke Soto out of Houston up top. And that guy's just been a great poacher for this team. He's a 2007, so he's playing up, but he's been scoring at a pretty good rate for this squad. So if Zeke Soto is available to play, like looks very good in the box. But Figueroa is somebody who could be a really exciting player. Like obviously someone to look out for. I'm just going to run through the rest of who I assume will be the starters for this tournament. First, we have Stuart Hawkins. He's a center back out of Seattle. As mentioned before, 2006 is this age group, but he actually played up with the 2005s as Seattle won the Generation Adidas Cup last year, and he's just a very like solid all around player. Like with center backs, it's a bit tougher to gauge like how good they'll be because it's a position that you get better at as you age. But he has every trait that you need at the moment. Like he just needs to keep developing and he's be on a really good track. Then there's Tyler Hall out of Inter Miami. He's been the captain of this team a lot, so I'd expect him to play. He's been very solid for Inter Miami. Their academy has really been kicking into another gear lately. I think they'll be one of the top ones in the pretty near future. He's a guy who's a very good athlete, and on top of that, like the leadership I mentioned, good defensively. He'll have to grow a bit more if he really wants to be like a center back at the next level. If not, he'll be a pretty good defensive right back, but just a good leader for the squad, good center back to have. Then one issue with this team is the lack of left backs. I'll get into that a little bit later. Honestly, lack of left-footed players in general. But I think at right back, it's probably going to be Aiden Harangi. He's out of Frankfurt in Germany. This is another guy who I haven't seen like the most footage of. It's a bit harder when players are in Europe, but he's uh, he's a bit more of a defensive midfielder who's playing right back with this team. And I think if I had to compare him to somebody, it'd be a bit like Rico Lewis, who's from Man City. I mean, obviously not the potential that Lewis has at the moment, but like can go into the midfield, can do a decent job defensively. They're actually similar sizes as well. And I think he looks like a pretty good player. I'm excited to see a bit more of him this camp. Then at left back, it's going to be Oscar Verhoeven, who is playing out of position. He's more of a right back. And this is a guy who's really fun to watch. He's a decent defender, like not decent. He's like a good defender at this level, but like attacking is where he's like really standing out. A very good dribbler, like a lot of creative play from him. Like a little bit like I guess like a Tariq Lamptey might be a decent comparison, where he just does like a lot of excited things from this position. Though he is like pretty tall, like he does have the height, unlike Lamptey, and just another fun player to watch. Like he could be very good combining with the left wings in this team. And then at defensive midfield, there's Edwin Mendoza. He'll likely be playing the six for us, and like there's a lot of really exciting like midfielders in this group. Like, and we'll get into some that I haven't even mentioned yet. But Mendoza, he's going to be the rock on this team. He'll be doing the dirty work in the midfield, like really helping the team play a lot more together. Like just really helps out the squad when he's in the team. And on top of that, he's getting a lot better in possession. Like he's good in possession. He's really just growing as a player. I think maybe if you're watching the U20 team, and I don't know how you'd be watching this video if you're unaware of the U20 team, he's like the Daniel Edelman of this team, just really helping out and building with the squad. And that's it for the rest of the starters. Then one more position. Wing is the tougher position to predict for this team. Not sure if there's any like true wingers in this team. Right now I'd expect it to be Micah Burton. He's out of Austin. He's one of their most promising players and just really good in like tight spaces, good technically and like a good IQ. He always pops up in like really strong positions. Like he looks like a promising player, but he's not really like a true winger in this squad. Like he might be a bit more of a midfielder, similar to Medina, and even the rest of the players are listed as attackers, like a Romero, a David Vasquez. They're probably going to end up being midfielders. Vasquez is from the Union, and they don't even play with wings, so that's a bit of a position that I'm not as sure about. Like even though then I'm like not entirely sure on these predictions. Like I could see Christian Diaz starting at center back, or maybe somebody else in the midfield, but wing is a position that we'll have to see because it's a bit like the U20 team where we have a lot of really technical players and not too many guys who are like the who can stretch out the defense, have a lot of speed and can dribble past players. There are a few players who are missing from the squad that I want to run through, and there are a couple of wingers there. Andre Guiteau, he's currently without a club, actually. He might be training with Houston still. That's where he was from with their academy. And he's a guy who is like a true winger, and he looks really good. Not going to get into him too much because he's not going to be playing, but he is a really talented prospect, as well as a Fidel Bajaras, who's actually playing with Mexico this tournament. He's just joined the Charleston Battery, so he'll be playing a bit of pro minutes this year. Another guy who looks promising, but unfortunately he won't be there. Another guy who won't be there is Christian McFarland, a left back who would have really helped this team. He's in 2007, so he would be playing up, but he looks like a really good prospect. He was one of the better players with England's youth teams a little bit ago, and he's with NYCFC. He'd be really good to recruit to this squad. Hopefully, he'll be here for the U17 World Cup. I mean, I'm assuming we'll qualify. Another guy who's unavailable is Matai Akinboni. If I butchered any names, let me know. It's good to get that corrected now. He's the guy who's actually been playing pro for DC, like in the MLS. He's gotten a good amount of minutes. He's a left-footed center back, and again, we need a couple of left-footed players in this team. And man, he looks like a really solid player, good on the ball, big guy, like huge. And if he's impressed Wayne Rooney, that's a pretty decent sign, but he's going to be unavailable. Then Brian Diston, he's a striker. He'll be playing with Haiti, another guy who's just good player, but dual national. And then we've got just a ton of center midfielders who aren't here. Jude Wellings out of Real Salt Lake, like he looks like a really talented player. Bento Estrella, he's actually a dual national from New York Red Bulls. He's not here. And Luis Moreno, another guy out of Houston. Then you have like a Matthew Cochran, Axel Perez, who would be playing up. Like a lot of really talented players who aren't here, but I feel pretty good about this team that we have, and we should be able to do very well this tournament. In terms of this tournament in particular, it should be relatively easy to qualify for the U17 World Cup. We need to reach the semifinals in order to qualify, and I think that should be pretty easily achievable. There are a couple of group games for us, which I feel like will be pretty easy. Canada does have a team in our group. I've been looking into them a little bit. I think they'll be tougher, but I think like we should be winning basically every game. Mexico will probably play us in the final. If you know these tournaments, you like it's kind of set up that US plays Mexico in the final every time. So I'm assuming that'll happen. And it's going to be good to watch these guys play. I think we have a lot of good prospects. And again, we can't judge players too much based off of youth competitions because like anything can happen. A lot of guys who like aren't there could become great stars. A lot of guys who are here could become great players. Like we did see like a Josh Sargent and Tim Weah really announce themselves, but we've also seen players who did well on these tournaments who didn't play well, and guys who are just late bloomers who aren't invited here. Like injuries are a thing, so players might not be involved. But I think it's going to be fun to watch these guys play. We've got a lot of good players coming through. I feel pretty good about this 2006 class. We have some solid players here, and this is the equivalent of being a 2002 at the last World Cup, and we had a lot of players who were 2002s like Gio Reyna, Yunus Musa, Joe Scally, all impacted the tournament. So like I'm very excited about watching this team. I think we could have a lot of good players who could impact the USA in the future. And yeah, that's all I'll talk about. See ya.